Welcome to the Book Binge. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and every time I talk about manga, I have to clarify right at the start of the video that I am not a manga channel. This is not something that happens very often here, so if you're clicking on this video expecting for me to be a manga dedicated channel, unfortunately I have to be the bearer of bad news that I am not that. I have read like 4 manga over the last however many years, and 2 of those were uber short, and the others were pretty limited in size as well, those being Goodbye Eri, Uzumaki, Monster, Girl from the Other Side, all some pretty limited series, all things considered, and the last one of these that I read was over December to January recently, and then December to January the year before that. So like that kind of goes to show this is not something that happens very often. And also, you know, if you happen to be somebody who's not super into manga and you clicked on this video, I guess this is your peace of mind that I'm not converting into just a manga channel, because I'm not. But all that being said, it is time to read another manga now. I've been anticipating reading another manga again soon, and it's been a while that I've been discussing this plan with one of my friends, and I am now finally ready to do so. But you saw the thumbnail and probably also what is in the title. You know that my next manga series that I'm reading, this isn't something that I'm, you know, beating around the bush about like I did with The Girl from the Other Side. This is Vinland Saga. I had my eye on this series for several reasons, and it's pretty easy to consolidate what some of those reasons are. The topic, the concept, etc. of the series is bound to be an interesting one that I am very interested in actually checking out, you know, and Vinland Saga is a manga and also an anime, but the manga particularly seems to have an overall really great reputation amongst fans, and it's a bit longer than some of my other manga that I have read, while still being relatively somewhat manageable, at being only 14 volumes currently. The 15th volume is coming out in October, and that's the last one of those volumes. I already have it pre-ordered, so you know, it's finishing relatively soon. That means that it's a pretty good time for me to jump in and actually start reading the series. So, you know, when I decided to pick up Vinland Saga, or pick up, you know, the 13 volumes or something that were available at the time back in late 2024, I was basically just waiting for the series to finish up. It seemed at that time like it was going to be any month the end would be announced, and then, well, it did finally finish up in the original Japanese about a year ago at the time of this video's release. So then the wait was basically just for the final volume to be translated and published here. Like I said already, the final volume is coming out now in October. I've already pre-ordered it, so I've got the rest of my collection up there on the shelf, because even though I did get the whole set down to make the thumbnail, I was not going to do that for this video because frankly, I'm too lazy, and I'm still feeling under the weather from earlier in the month. So, yeah, that is basically what I've got going on. That is the bulk of what this video is about, is just announcing that this is the series that I'm reading next. I'm going to be reading this with a buddy of mine, Reen. I'm looking forward to it for sure. Vinland Saga is my next manga. But that does kind of, you know, beg the next question. What is my approximate reading schedule for the series? How long do I expect for this to take me? And then, you know, what are going to be my expectations and how I'm going to cover it, all of that kind of stuff. But we'll get to those topics in due time. Let's start off with the reading schedule side of things. When am I going to read Vinland Saga? The simple answer is I am starting it in July, assuming that answer wasn't already in, you know, the title of this video. I believe this video comes out on June 28th. So honestly, probably here in like a couple of weeks, or within the next couple of weeks, I will be starting Vinland Saga and giving it a go alongside one of my buddies. Like I said, how long the entire series will take me to actually get through is still a little bit to be determined, but obviously it will take at least through October, because October is when the final volume actually comes out. Optimally, I could see doing the series like 1 arc per month, basically. So that would mean, like, you know, at the absolute quickest, we shall say, July would be the war arc, which is the first 4 volumes basically. August could be the slave arc, which is the next 3 volumes 5 through 7. Volumes 8 through like approximately halfway through 11 would be the Eastern Expedition arc after that, and then October, the Vinland arc, to finish off volume 11 all the way through 15 would be like probably the quickest pace that I see myself getting through the series. Like I said, optimally, that is basically what the schedule could be. However, There are a couple things preventing me from nailing down that as the proper schedule for the moment. Number one of those being that I don't actually know if the German translation finishes around the same time as the English translation, when the last volume in that language will actually be out. My friend who I'm going to be reading the series with is picking up the German editions of the series. So, you know, I don't know when that actually finishes up, so I'm not going to say for sure that I could read it that quick, because it might be that the German isn't quite ready for that soon. So, you know, you never know. But either way, I will basically loosely plan on each arc taking a couple of months. You know, the other reason why I don't foresee myself going for that whole one arc per month is because that's like an entire volume a week, basically. And while, you know, manga reads pretty quickly, and it's not like it would be impossible to read one of these a week, with some of my other reading plans and other buddy reads and stuff that I've got going on over the next few months, I don't want to, you know, overdo it, right? I don't want to dedicate to reading an entire one of these every week. I would rather just read them however long it takes. Like I said, I could definitely see each of these arcs basically taking a couple of months on the longer end of things. I will probably still finish Vinland Saga by the end of 2026 in either case, but that is the approximate reading schedule. We'll say I'll probably be done by the end of the year. I could be done as early as October if we were to go super quick, but it'll probably be, you know, closer to the December-January period of time when we actually finish. So that is when we're planning to read the series. That's also the reason why I got these first 4 volumes down off the shelf and none of the rest, was because this is the first arc. But yeah, what are my expectations for Vinland Saga? That is the next question to, I guess, briefly answer in this video, and that is pretty simple to answer, actually. I basically don't have much of an expectation. I mostly just know that Vinland Saga is a sort of a historical epic. I know it's historical fiction, but I know that it is a historical epic. I'm not expecting, like, fantasy per se, but something, you know, that is topically a little bit more akin to the books that I read as far as like the general tone and subject matter and stuff is concerned. A lot of what I read is sort of closer to fantasy than the topics that I have read about in manga up to this point, like Goodbye Eri, Uzumaki, Girl from the Other Side. Like, these aren't necessarily similar to books that I read for the most part. I mean, Uzumaki being horror in a specific body horror kind of way is, I guess you could say, is not too far off. But even like the fairy tale vibes of Girl from the Other Side, it has a little bit of fantasy vibes in there. So it's sort of in that realm. It's basically what I'm just saying is that Vinland Saga is something that seems a little bit more directly relevant to the kind of realm of reading that I'm into, broadly speaking, when it comes to regular books. So I think that I'll be able to enjoy this in its manga sense from all of that. I also expect, based off of just very brief looking things up online, I expect some pretty deep thematic exploration within the context of its historical setting. I think that that is something that is definitely rife with possibility for rich discussion, you know, only just now realizing what the broader conceit of the series is recently as well. It just sounds like it is something that could be very good, very well done and explored, and something that I'm excited to check out and see if it actually holds up the way that a lot of other people seem to think it does. I mean, it seems like the story starts off from like a sort of revenge plot kind of way before the search for Vinland actually begins. So in that kind of sense, from a thematic point of view, if that revenge arc is something that is what it starts out doing, I'll be, you know, like, interested to compare that to some other revenge stories that I've been covering recently on my other channel, and kind of think about it in that way. You know, just generally speaking, it's a little bit more of this broader stuff. Like, I'm interested to see what happens. I don't know a whole ton about what's going on in here. My expectations are pretty muted because I don't really have many. You know, I try to go into most of what I read as blindly as I can manage most of the time, and I feel like I've done that for Vinland Saga outside of, you know, like the prologue, basically. I kind of know a little bit of what goes on in the very beginning of this, but even that's vague enough that it doesn't spoil anything. So, like I said, I just kind of don't feel like I have too many outright expectations. So let me know some things that I can look forward to with the series without spoilers, if you would be so kind to do so. All that being said, with regard to my coverage of the series, you may know, if you have followed the channel, that of the 4 manga that I have read up to this point, Uzumaki, Goodbye Eri, Monster, and Girl from the Other Side, these are stories that I reviewed after I had finished the stories. For Goodbye Eri and Uzumaki, that made sense because they're pretty short. Even Uzumaki being an omnibus of 3 volumes technically is still easily read as basically one big volume, so you can review it at once. Even Monster, the 9 volumes of that, I reviewed all at once. But, reviewing Monster, which was about 160 or so chapters, if I'm not mistaken, that was a lot to keep track of after a little while. So Vinland Saga, being a handful of volumes longer, and I think somewhere around 60 chapters longer, will definitely be a little bit too much for me to keep track of as far as like reviewing it from a whole series perspective is concerned from the get-go. So it's not like I'm going to read the entire manga and then cover it. Probably what I'll do is I'll cover each of those 4 arcs that I described earlier before. The first 4 volumes, then the next 3, then the next 3.5, then the final 4-ish worth is going to be how I probably cover things, right? So I think it's going to be reviewing these 4 arcs separately, probably the month after I finish each one of them, and then after I finish the entire series, I'll kind of, do a wrap-up of the entire thing that goes into ranking the arcs individually or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but basically expect a handful of manga videos this year and maybe early next year as well, depending on how long it takes me to read this. But again, I'm not turning into a manga channel. This isn't going to be something that becomes super regular all of a sudden. It'll probably just be, I don't know, if I were to guess, probably 5, maybe 6 at most videos, if I were to guess, dedicated to Vinland Saga between now and I guess the first couple months of 2027. So that's basically what I've got going on, what I've got planned at the moment. But there you have it. That is going to be the end of this video. Another King Crusoe manga read in the books, scheduled anyway. This has definitely been a long time coming, and I can't wait to get to it, can't wait to start Vinland Saga. I only own one other manga series after this that I have not actually read yet, so my options are getting a little bit limited here, but that just means that I basically need to decide on and buy a couple more manga series come 2027 for when I'm actually ready to read something, because the last manga series that I own that I haven't read, I don't want to read anytime soon, so for emotional reasons. But yeah, if you want to read Vinland Saga with my buddy Reen and I and give impressions on those individual arc reviews, feel free to do so. If you're somebody who has already read Vinland Saga and you're not choosing to reread it ahead of this last volume coming out in the English anyway, I hope to hear your thoughts as I go along as well. But all that being said, that is the end of this video. Thank you for watching if you did. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video, whatever that may be.